I'm Marcia. Sitting in the financial advisor's office, I watched as my parents, Richard and Vivian, discussed their investment portfolio with Mr. Henry Thompson, a well-respected financial advisor. The room smelled of leather and exuded an air of old wealth, a place where people flaunted their affluence. My parents were boasting about their substantial portfolio, worth around $180 million. Richard leaned back in his chair with an air of self-assurance, talking about real estate, blue-chip stocks, and private equity. Vivian nodded, her diamond earrings glistening in the afternoon light. Mr. Thompson smiled professionally and complimented their portfolio. They were considering consolidating their accounts with his firm, Thompson Wealth Management. As they talked, I sat in the corner, a silent observer. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. It was an urgent call from my company, Phoenix Capital Advisors, the firm I'd founded 10 years ago under my legal name, Marcia Phoenix Reed. My parents knew me as Marcia Reed, their underachieving daughter who couldn't hold a proper job. I stepped into the hallway to answer the call. It was my operations manager, Mark M.S. Reed. The Thompson due diligence request came through. They're asking for full transparency on the Reed family portfolio holdings. My heart sank. I knew this moment was coming. I asked for details, and Mark explained that they wanted to know the beneficial ownership structure of all investment vehicles. If we complied, they'd discover that Phoenix Capital Advisors, meaning me, controlled 95% of my parents' $180 million portfolio. I leaned against the wall, lost in thought. For the past 6 years, I'd managed my parents' money through a complex web of shell companies and investment vehicles. They thought they were brilliant investors, but in reality, every successful trade, every well-timed purchase was my doing. My mind drifted back to when I was 25. Fresh out of business school with a finance degree, I tried to share my investment ideas with my parents. Richard laughed it off, saying, "Leave the serious money matters to the grown-ups, dear." Vivian suggested I focus on finding a good husband instead. Feeling dismissed, I took the $80,000 inheritance from my grandfather, the only one who believed in me, and started Phoenix Capital Advisors. Over the years, I'd grown the firm to manage over $400 million for clients, including tech moguls and wealthy families. My parents' portfolio was a prime example of my success. They had investments in properties in Paris, Tokyo, and Miami. The Paris property was a luxury apartment complex I'd bought at the bottom of the market 6 years ago. It had quadrupled in value. The Tokyo tech investments had generated over $5 million in returns, and the Miami properties were perfectly positioned for a real estate boom. They also held a significant stake in a biotech company, Meditech Innovations, which I'd founded 5 years ago. The company was developing revolutionary gene editing technology and was currently valued at $100 million. My parents' shares were worth $15 million, and they had no idea I was the CEO. Before I took over their accounts, they'd been hemorrhaging money for 25 years. Richard loved to follow hot stock tips from his golf buddies, and Vivian invested based on the brands she liked. They were on the verge of financial disaster, just 3 years from retirement with $1,200,000 in losses over the past 6 years. I'd restructured their entire portfolio, moving their assets into vehicles I controlled. I'd worked silently for 6 years, watching them take credit for my success while constantly reminding me of my supposed financial incompetence. Back in the office, Mr. Thompson was showing my parents a presentation about his firm's services. When I sat down, Vivian asked if everything was okay. I said it was just work. Richard was surprised I had a job and asked what it was. I vaguely said I was in consulting, the cover story I'd used for years. Mr. Thompson then mentioned that he needed to review the ownership structures of their holdings. Richard waved it off, saying our advisors at Phoenix Capital had set it all up for tax efficiency and estate planning. He also asked if they had other children involved in estate planning. Vivian said I was their only child but that they'd structured things so the money would go to charities if I couldn't manage it responsibly. I felt a pang in my chest. They were sitting on $180 million that I'd built, yet they thought I was financially irresponsible. I decided it was time to reveal the truth. Actually, I said quietly, there's something you should know about the portfolio structure. Most of the holdings aren't directly in your names. Richard looked at me patiently, like he was explaining to a child. That's how sophisticated investing works, honey. It's for tax purposes. I took a deep breath and said, the beneficial ownership of about 95% of your portfolio assets is held by Phoenix Capital Advisors. Mr. Thompson's eyes widened. That's highly unusual. Typically, investment firms have discretionary authority, not beneficial ownership. Vivian laughed. No, Marcia, you're confused. We own the assets, Phoenix just manages them. I pulled out my phone and showed them my work email, Marcia Phoenix Reed, founder and CEO of Phoenix Capital Advisors. I also showed them the company's website with my professional bio. Richard's face turned red. This is insane. You're saying you've been managing our money? That's impossible. We make the investment decisions. I calmly asked him about the Paris real estate acquisition, the Tokyo tech investments, and the Miami properties. He was silent. I reminded him of the time they asked me to help organize their paperwork after a bad quarter. They'd lost $70,000 in 2 months on bad stock picks. I showed them the records of their past 25 years of investing. They'd contributed $2 million but had only netted $800,000. At their rate, they'd have been in financial ruin within a decade. Mr. Thompson was impressed by the portfolio's performance. The returns are extraordinary. This is institutional-grade work. I told them that for 6 years, I'd restructured their portfolio, protected them from bad decisions, and turned their near disaster into $180 million. Vivian was in shock. Why would you do this? If you're so good with money, why not let us fail? I said, because you're my parents. Despite being told I was bad with money, I didn't want you to lose everything. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat and said he wasn't sure what this meant for the wealth management transition. I told him that if my parents wanted to transfer their assets to Thompson Wealth Management, they'd need my approval as the beneficial owner of 95% of their portfolio. I presented them with 2 options. Option 1. They acknowledge my role as their investment advisor, we restructure the accounts for transparency, and I continue managing their portfolio. Option 2. I liquidate all positions in Phoenix Capital vehicles on their behalf. After federal and state taxes, they'd receive approximately $115 million, and they could invest with whoever they wanted. Richard was furious. You're saying we'd lose $65 million just to get away from you? I corrected him. You'd lose $65 million in taxes to regain direct control. Or you could recognize that your so-called financially incompetent daughter is one of the top wealth managers in the country. Vivian's hands were shaking. How could you lie to us for 6 years? I replied, I didn't lie. I just didn't correct your assumptions. You took credit for my work while dismissing me. Mr. Thompson advised them to take the rest of the day to consider. He said professionally, option 1 was the better choice as I'd generated extraordinary returns. At 4:47 p.m. My phone rang. It was Vivian. She said they'd been talking all afternoon, even consulting a lawyer. They weren't signing the liquidation document. She said they had conditions. They wanted transparency, monthly portfolio reviews, and to understand how I'd achieved such success. I agreed. She also said Richard wanted an apology. I laughed and said I wasn't apologizing for saving them from financial ruin. I told her Richard should apologize for dismissing my intelligence all these years. After some silence, she said Richard would table the apology discussion. I told her to send me a signed copy of option 1 by the end of the business day tomorrow. As I sat in my office watching the sunset, my phone buzzed with the signed documents. Option 1 was accepted. James, my assistant, knocked on the door. The Reed family is staying? I nodded. Yes, and it's for the best. I won't accept being dismissed, but I'm willing to work with them on honest terms. 6 years of quiet work had finally been recognized. The daughter they thought was financially incompetent had been the mastermind behind their financial success. Sometimes, the best way to prove yourself is to be so good at what you do that the truth can no longer be hidden.